Imagine a room so small you can almost touch both walls at the same time. Now imagine living in that tiny space for 27 years. That's not a movie, that's real life. That was the life of Nelson Mandela. He was locked away on an island in a cold, damp cell with only a thin mat to sleep on. Why? Because he dared to say that everyone in his country, South Africa, should be free. He believed that the color of your skin shouldn't decide your future, your dreams, or where you could live. For this simple, powerful idea of equality, he was called a criminal and hidden from the world, a man the government hoped everyone would forget. But you can't just make a person like that disappear. Even from behind stone walls and iron bars, Mandela's spirit grew larger than his prison. He was separated from his family, his children grew up without him, and he missed so many moments of life that we all take for granted. Yet inside that tiny cell, he wasn't just counting the days. He was preparing, he was studying, he was thinking, and he was planning for a future that seemed impossible. He learned the language of his jailers, not to fight them with their own words, but to understand them, to one day reason with them. It was a masterclass in patience and strategy played out over decades. Then one day, after 27 long years, the prison doors finally opened. The world held its breath. What would this man do? Would he be filled with anger? Would he seek revenge on the people who stole nearly 3 decades of his life? Everyone expected him to come out with a fist raised in anger, ready to burn it all down. He had every right to be bitter, to want payback for the injustice he and his people had suffered. The country was on the edge of a civil war, a knife's edge of tension, and his first words, his first actions, would decide which way it would fall. And what did he do? He chose peace. He chose forgiveness. It's one of the most incredible things a human being has ever done. Instead of calling for revenge, he called for reconciliation. He reached out his hand to the very people who had locked him away. He said, "Let's build a new South Africa, together." This single act of grace, of choosing understanding over hatred, was more powerful than any weapon. It was the moment a prisoner who had every reason to hate started the journey of healing a nation and became its president, its father. It was the ultimate long game, and he won it for everyone. Long before the prison cell, long before the struggle, there was a boy named Rolihlahla. In his language, Xhosa, the name affectionately meant pulling the branch of a tree, or more simply, troublemaker. He was born in a small village called Mvezo, a place of rolling hills and mud huts, where life was connected to the earth. He was the son of a chief, part of a royal family, so he grew up listening to the stories of his ancestors, tales of bravery and leadership. He learned about his people's history before the white settlers arrived, a time when they were free to rule themselves. These stories planted a seed in his young mind, a seed of pride and justice. His father passed away when he was young, and he was taken in by the regent, the acting king of his people, the Thembu. He was sent to school, which was a big deal back then. It was at school that he was given the English name Nelson by a teacher, as was the custom. He was a good student, very curious, and always asking questions. He went on to study at a university, a rare opportunity for a black person in those days. It was there that his world started to get bigger. He met other young, smart Africans who were also starting to see the unfairness around them. They started talking, sharing ideas, and realizing they all wanted the same thing, a better, fairer life for their people. But his path wasn't a straight line. The regent had arranged a marriage for him, as was the tradition. But Mandela had his own dreams. He wasn't ready to settle down. He wanted more. So, in a very brave move, he ran away from home. He ran away to the biggest city in South Africa, Johannesburg. It was a world away from his quiet village. Johannesburg was a city of gold, literally, with huge mines, but it was also a city of stark, brutal inequality. It was here that he saw the full picture of the system that was crushing his people. He saw black people working in dangerous mines for very little money while white people lived in luxury. In Johannesburg, he got a job as a law clerk and started studying law at night. He wanted to use the law to fight the system from within. He believed in the power of rules and justice. He and his friend Oliver Tambo even opened the first black-owned law firm in the country. They were defending people who had no one else to turn to, people who were arrested for not having the right papers or for being in the wrong part of town. But he soon realized that the law itself was the problem. The system wasn't just broken, it was designed to be unfair. And that's when the young boy from the village knew he had to become more than a lawyer. He had to become a freedom fighter. So, what was this system that Mandela decided to fight? It was called Apartheid. Now that's a fancy-sounding Afrikaans word, but what it means is very simple: apartness or separateness. Imagine playing a game where the rules are different for everyone depending on what you look like. That was apartheid. The government created laws to separate people based on race. They put everyone into categories: white, black, colored, and Indian. And these labels decided everything about your life. It wasn't just about people not liking each other, it was the law of the land, enforced by the police and the army. It was separation by force. Under apartheid, where you could live was decided by your race. The government created separate areas for each group. Black people were forced to live in crowded, underdeveloped areas called townships, often far away from the cities where they worked. They needed a special document, a passbook, just to travel into the white areas. If you were caught without your pass, you could be arrested and thrown in jail. Think about that. Needing a permission slip to walk around in your own country. Families were torn apart. Men would go work in the cities and live in hostels, only seeing their wives and children maybe once a year. It was a system designed to break people's spirits. The separation was everywhere. There were separate schools, separate hospitals, separate beaches, separate park benches, even separate entrances to post offices. And the white facilities were always better. The schools for black children received far less funding. The hospitals were overcrowded and understaffed. The jobs available to black people were mostly manual labor, with very low pay. It was a system that told millions of people every single day, in 1,000 different ways, that they were less valuable, less human than others. It wasn't just unfair, it was humiliating. It was designed to steal people's dignity. And the goal of all this? It was about power and control. A small white minority wanted to keep all the country's wealth and political power for themselves. By keeping everyone else divided and powerless, they thought they could rule forever. They used fear and violence to maintain this system. If you spoke out against it, you were labeled a communist or a terrorist. You could be arrested without a trial, banned from public gatherings, or worse. This was the world Nelson Mandela saw, and he knew he couldn't just stand by and watch. He knew he had to break the rules of this terrible game, even if it meant risking his own life. Faced with this giant wall of injustice, Mandela and his comrades in the African National Congress, or ANC, didn't start with violence. Their first weapon was people. They believed in peaceful protest. They organized boycotts where people would refuse to buy from businesses that supported apartheid. They organized strikes, where workers would refuse to go to their jobs, shutting down parts of the economy to show how much the country depended on their labor. They organized defiance campaigns where large groups of people would break the petty apartheid laws on purpose. They would walk through whites-only entrances or sit on whites-only benches, all to get arrested and flood the jails, showing the world how ridiculous and evil the system was. These acts of peaceful protest were incredibly brave. The people participating knew they would be met with force. They knew they could lose their jobs, be beaten by police, or be thrown in prison. But they did it anyway. Mandela was a key organizer, a charismatic leader who could inspire thousands to join the cause. He traveled across the country, often in disguise, organizing and encouraging people to stand up for their rights without raising a fist. The goal was to make apartheid impossible to manage, to clog up the system with nonviolent resistance and force the government to listen. For a time, it felt like a powerful strategy, a moral high ground that the world could see and support. But the government didn't want to listen. They responded with more laws and more brutality. And then came a day that changed everything. March 21st, 1960. In a township called Sharpeville, a large crowd of unarmed people gathered outside a police station. They were protesting the pass laws. They were peaceful. They were just singing and chanting. But the police panicked. They opened fire on the crowd. They shot people in the back as they tried to run away. In just a few minutes, 69 people were killed, and hundreds more were injured. The Sharpeville massacre shocked South Africa and the world. The blood spilled at Sharpeville showed Mandela and the ANC that their peaceful strategy had a tragic limit. How can you have a peaceful conversation with someone who answers with bullets? The government declared a state of emergency. They banned the ANC, making it an illegal organization. Suddenly, just being a member was a crime. This was a turning point for Mandela. He came to the painful conclusion that the government had left them with no other choice. If they would not allow peaceful protest, the struggle for freedom would have to take a different, more dangerous path. The time for just talking was over. A new, armed wing of the ANC was formed, and the fight for freedom entered a new chapter. After Sharpeville, Mandela had to go underground. He became, well, kind of a ghost, moving from safe house to safe house, sometimes disguised as a chauffeur or a gardener. People started calling him the Black Pimpernel because he was a wanted man, always on the run from the security forces. During this time he helped establish Umkhonto we Sizwe, or Spear of the Nation, which was the armed wing of the ANC. They made a really tough decision. They would not target people but instead sabotage government property, like power plants and transportation lines. It was their way to fight back without causing a civil war, to hit the government where it hurt, but without targeting civilians. Still, living as a fugitive couldn't last forever. In 1962, Mandela was captured. The government had, at last, caught their most wanted man. He was first put on trial and sentenced to 5 years in prison for leaving the country illegally and for inciting strikes. But while he was serving that sentence, the police raided a secret ANC hideout on a farm in Rivonia. They found documents that linked Mandela and other ANC leaders to the armed struggle. So they brought him and his comrades back to court for a new, much more serious trial. This was the Rivonia trial. They were accused of sabotage and plotting to overthrow the government. The charges were so serious that honestly everyone knew the death penalty was a very real possibility. The trial became a global event. It was supposed to be the government's great victory, the moment they finally crushed the resistance for good. But Mandela turned the tables. He used the courtroom not as a place to defend himself, but as a platform to put apartheid itself on trial. Knowing he could be sentenced to hang, he stood in the dock and spoke for 4 hours. He didn't plead for his life. Instead, he calmly and powerfully explained why they had been forced to turn to armed resistance. He detailed the history of his people, the endless humiliation of apartheid, and the ANC's long, frustrating attempts at peaceful protests that were met only with violence. His speech ended with words that would echo around the world for decades. He looked the judge in the eye and laid out the vision he was willing to die for. He said, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities." And then came the final unforgettable line, "It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." After that speech, there was just silence in the courtroom. He had turned his own trial into a powerful testament to the struggle for freedom. He and his comrades were spared the death penalty, but they were sentenced to life in prison. Life in prison was meant to break him. He was sent to Robben Island, a windswept, maximum security prison in the middle of the ocean, a place where political prisoners were sent to be forgotten. He was known as Prisoner 466/64. That was his new name, the 466th prisoner, to arrive in the year 1964. They were given thin clothes and slept on cold concrete floors. The days were filled with pointless, back-breaking labor. For years, Mandela and the other prisoners were forced to work in a limestone quarry. The sun was blindingly bright, reflecting off the white rock, and the dust damaged their lungs and their eyes permanently. The conditions were brutal and designed to strip away their humanity. The guards were cruel. The food was terrible. Letters from family were censored and rare. They were cut off from the news of the world, from the very struggle they had dedicated their lives to. It was a place of immense psychological pressure, designed to make them feel hopeless and alone. The government wanted Robben Island to be an island of despair. They thought that by locking away the leaders, the movement for freedom would simply die out. But they underestimated the strength of the human spirit, and they definitely underestimated Nelson Mandela. Instead of becoming an island of despair, Robben Island became a university. Mandela and the other political prisoners turned their prison into a place of learning and resistance. They organized secret classes, teaching each other everything from history and politics to literature. Mandela, who had studied law, would help others with their legal cases. They would debate political strategies for hours while pretending to work in the quarry. They shared ideas, strengthened their resolve, and planned for a future South Africa that they might never get to see. They were physically imprisoned, but their minds remained free and sharp. Mandela became the undeniable leader on the island. He was the one who would stand up to the guards, not with aggression but with dignity. He fought for better conditions, for the right to study, for basic human respect. He earned the respect not only of his fellow prisoners, but even of some of the guards over the years. They saw his integrity, his unwavering principles, and his humanity. He became more than just a man. He became a symbol. For the people outside who couldn't see him or hear him, just knowing he was there, unbroken and defiant, was a powerful source of hope. The government had tried to bury him, but instead, they had turned him into a living legend. While Mandela was chipping away at rocks in the quarry, his name was becoming a powerful chant around the world. The ANC, operating in exile, made sure his story was not forgotten. His wife at the time, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, became a fierce and powerful voice for the struggle within South Africa, keeping his name alive despite constant harassment from the government. The world began to wake up to the horrors of apartheid. People in other countries saw the injustice and were inspired by the man who had sacrificed his freedom for his people. The call to free Nelson Mandela started as a whisper and grew into a global roar. This wasn't just a few activists, it became a massive international movement. Students on university campuses from America to Europe held protests. Churches and community groups organized vigils. Cities around the world renamed streets after him. Artists and musicians joined the cause. The song Free Nelson Mandela by the Special AKA became an international hit, a protest anthem that was played on radios everywhere. In 1988, a massive concert was held at Wembley Stadium in London to celebrate Mandela's 70th birthday. It was broadcast to over 60 countries, reaching an audience of hundreds of millions. Stars like Stevie Wonder and Whitney Houston performed, all demanding his release. This public pressure started to translate into political and economic pressure. Countries began to impose sanctions on South Africa. This meant they refused to trade with the country, to invest money there, or to let their sports teams compete against South African teams. The sports boycott hit white South Africans particularly hard, as they loved their rugby and cricket. Being isolated from the world made them feel like outcasts. The economic sanctions started to hurt the country's economy. Businesses were losing money. The value of their currency was falling. The apartheid government was becoming more and more isolated on the world stage. Inside prison, Mandela was offered his freedom several times by the government, but there was always a catch. They would say, you can go free, but you must renounce violence, or you can go free, but you must go live in a remote tribal homeland. Each time, Mandela refused. He would not accept a conditional freedom while his people were still oppressed. He sent a message out through his daughter saying, I cannot and will not give any undertaking at a time when I and you, the people, are not free. Your freedom and mine cannot be separated. I will return. This refusal, this act of ultimate integrity, only made his legend grow. He was showing the world that he was not just fighting for himself, he was fighting for everyone. By the late 1980s, South Africa was at a breaking point. The international pressure was immense, the economy was struggling, and the townships were in a constant state of rebellion. The apartheid government could see that the system was no longer sustainable. They were fighting a losing battle. A new president, F.W. de Klerk, came to power. He was a conservative, a man from deep within the apartheid system, but he was also a realist. He knew that things had to change, or the country would collapse into a bloody civil war. He began to take steps that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. De Klerk shocked the world. In a speech to Parliament on February 2, 1990, he announced that he was unbanning the ANC and other anti-apartheid groups. He announced that he was releasing many political prisoners, and then he said the words the world had been waiting to hear for 27 years. He was releasing Nelson Mandela, unconditionally. The news spread like wildfire. There was disbelief, then joy, then celebration. The impossible was actually happening. After almost 3 decades in the dark, the man who had become the world's most famous political prisoner was finally coming home. The nation and the world held its breath. On February 11, 1990, Nelson Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison a free man. He was older, his hair was gray, but his spirit was unbroken. He walked tall, holding Winnie's hand with his fist raised in a salute of victory and defiance. It was a moment seen live on television screens across the globe. It was pure history. But freedom from prison was only the first step. The much harder work was just beginning. The country was still deeply divided. There was fear and mistrust on all sides. Violence was still breaking out between different political groups. The task ahead was to dismantle the entire system of apartheid and build a new democratic nation from the ashes. Mandela immediately took on the role of a leader and a peacemaker. He and F.W. de Klerk began the long, difficult process of negotiating a new future for South Africa. There were many moments when it seemed like the talks would collapse, when violence threatened to derail everything. But Mandela's calm leadership and his unwavering commitment to a peaceful transition held it all together. He traveled the country speaking to both black and white South Africans, urging reconciliation over revenge. For their incredible work in steering the country away from civil war, Nelson Mandela and F.W. de Klerk, were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. They had started as enemies, but had become partners in building a new nation. In 1994, South Africa held its first ever democratic election where every citizen, of every race, had the right to vote. It was a miracle. Long lines of people snaked for miles, waiting patiently for hours to cast their vote for the first time in their lives. Old men and women who had lived their entire lives under oppression cried as they put their ballot in the box. It was a day of incredible joy and triumph. And, as everyone knew he would, Nelson Mandela was elected as the first black president of a free South Africa. The prisoner had become the president. As president, Mandela's biggest challenge was not just to govern, but to heal. He had to bring together a nation that had been taught for generations to hate and fear each other. He famously called it the Rainbow Nation, a vision of people of all colors living together in peace. He formed a government of national unity, inviting his former political rivals, including F.W. de Klerk, to serve in his cabinet. It was a powerful symbol of his commitment to working together. He also established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, a brave and painful process where victims of apartheid could tell their stories and perpetrators could confess their crimes in exchange for amnesty. It wasn't about revenge, it was about uncovering the truth so the country could heal and move on. But perhaps the most famous moment of his presidency came in 1995 during the Rugby World Cup, which was being hosted in South Africa. For decades, rugby and the national team, the Springboks, had been a symbol of white supremacy and apartheid. Most black South Africans hated the team and would cheer for anyone who played against them. But Mandela saw an opportunity. He publicly supported the Springboks, encouraging black citizens to get behind the team as a symbol of a new united nation. He met with the team captain, Francois Pienaar, and inspired him with his vision. When South Africa made it to the final against the mighty New Zealand All Blacks, the entire country was captivated. On the day of the final, Mandela walked onto the field wearing a Springbok jersey with Pienaar's number on the back. The crowd, which was mostly white, erupted in a spontaneous chant of "Nelson, Nelson, Nelson." It was an unbelievable moment. When South Africa won the game in a thrilling victory, Mandela presented the trophy to Pienaar. It was more than just a sporting victory. It was a symbol that the Rainbow Nation was possible. It was an act of forgiveness and unity that a million speeches could never have achieved. Nelson Mandela served only one term as president. In 1999 he stepped down, which is a rare thing for a leader of his stature, especially in Africa. He believed in the power of democratic institutions and wanted to show that the country was bigger than one man. But retiring from the presidency did not mean retiring from public life. He simply changed his job title from president to global elder. He couldn't just sit still, his work was not done. He shifted his incredible energy and moral authority towards tackling other major global issues, proving that his fight for justice extended far beyond South Africa's borders. One of his biggest post-presidency missions was the fight against HIV/AIDS. At the time, the disease was devastating sub-Saharan Africa, and many leaders were silent about it, afraid of the stigma. Mandela confronted the issue head-on with his characteristic honesty and courage. The fight became deeply personal when he publicly announced that his own son, Magatho, had died from an AIDS-related illness. He said, "Let us give publicity to HIV/AIDS and not hide it, because the only way to make it appear like a normal illness is to come out and say somebody has died from it." His bravery helped to break the silence and mobilized a global response to the pandemic. He also established the Nelson Mandela Foundation and the Elders, a group of independent global leaders including people like Desmond Tutu and Jimmy Carter, who worked together for peace and human rights. He became the world's conscience, a moral compass that leaders and ordinary people looked to for guidance. He would speak out against poverty, conflict, and injustice wherever he saw it. Even in his old age, he traveled the world, not as a politician, but as a humanitarian, lending his voice to those who had none, and reminding everyone of their shared responsibility to make the world a better place. Even as he grew more frail and appeared less in public, his presence was always felt. He spent his final years in his childhood home of Kunu, surrounded by the hills and memories that had shaped him. He was no longer the prisoner or the president, he was Madiba, the affectionate clan name everyone used for him, which means father. He was the father of a nation. He had completed his long walk to freedom, but he had also laid down a path for others to follow. His work continued through the foundations he created and, more importantly, through the millions of people he had inspired to believe in the power of peace, forgiveness, and perseverance. On December 5, 2013, Nelson Mandela passed away at the age of 95. The news brought a wave of sadness not just to South Africa, but to the entire world. People from all walks of life, from presidents to ordinary citizens, mourned the loss of a true global hero. His funeral was attended by leaders from across the globe, a testament to the incredible impact he had on humanity. But even in death, his story was not one of sadness, but one of triumph. He had lived to see his dream come true, a free, democratic, and non-racial South Africa. He had proven that no prison can contain an idea, and no amount of hate can extinguish love. Today, Mandela's legacy is celebrated all over the world. His birthday, July 18th, has been declared Mandela Day by the United Nations. It's not a public holiday for relaxing, it's a call to action. People are encouraged to spend 67 minutes of their time doing something good for their community, 1 minute for every year he dedicated to public service. It's a beautiful tribute, turning his life of struggle into a global movement of kindness and service. Statues of him stand in major cities, books and movies tell his story, and his words are quoted by people seeking inspiration and courage in their own lives. So, what is the final lesson we can learn from the boy from Mvezo who became the father of a nation? It's a lesson with two powerful parts. The first is courage. The courage to stand up for what is right, even when it seems impossible, even when you are standing alone, and even when it costs you your freedom. He showed us that one person's determination can indeed change the world. He fought against an entire system of oppression, not with bitterness, but with an unshakable belief in the justice of his cause. His life is a reminder that our own challenges, no matter how big they seem, can be faced with strength and integrity. But the most important part of his legacy, the part that still shocks the world with its power, is forgiveness. After all he endured, the lost years, the suffering of his family and his people, he chose not to seek revenge. He chose reconciliation. He taught us that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness. It is the ultimate sign of strength. It is a weapon that liberates the oppressed and the oppressor alike. It is the key to breaking the cycle of hatred and violence. Nelson Mandela's life is a timeless story that shows us the very best of what humanity can be. He walked a long, hard road to freedom, and in doing so, he left a trail of light for all of us to follow.